Hello, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to Asia Art Archive. My name is Özge Ersoy. I'm with the curatorial team at AAA. I just want to say that we are very, very proud and happy to be hosting today's event that's organized by the Art Basel Hong Kong team. And one thing I would like to share is that Asia Art Archive has been a cultural partner of Art Basel Hong Kong for 9 years now. And we really appreciate your engagement and your commitment to independent art spaces in Hong Kong. And I think today's event is really a testament to that. I just want to thank the whole team of Art Basel, and especially Stephanie and Emma, who really put together today's program. So without further ado, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Özge. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here this evening as we kick off Art Basel Hong Kong's conversation program in the city for 2024. The full program is available online. There's a barcode outside, and you can see the whole lineup for the fair this March, which is free to the public with simultaneous translation. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Christopher and Özge and the whole Asia Art Archive team for welcoming us here tonight in company with this stunning Mrinalini Mukherjee exhibition, which is really outstanding, and I recommend everyone to have a look at the sculpture if you have some time. I'd also like to thank Eunice Tang and to welcome Eunice and the speakers, the panel, to the floor, please. So thank you so much, Eunice Tang, who's the founder of Current Plans, who agreed to moderate this conversation. And please join me in welcoming our speakers, Joseph Chen, Head of Culture at Eaton Hong Kong, and the co-founders of New Park, Michelle Wong, South Ho, and Billy Kwok. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Emma and the whole Art Basel team. So this talk, I think, will be like 中英夾接, okay? Because we're in Hong Kong. Anyway, so this is really nice, like, to kickstart this conversation because
So we are all friends. We have known each other for a long time, but we seldom sit down together in such a serious manner. So this time we have to be a bit more serious. So let me briefly introduce. My name is Eunice. I am leading the work in an alternative space. I think this is worth our discussion. What kind of vocabulary should be used to describe our space? But let us first introduce ourselves. We are not working on alternative art space full-time. We have other jobs, and there are other things that we are doing, so perhaps we can introduce ourselves. Yes, I'm Joseph. I am from Star Talk Culture. Eaton. Eaton is a hotel, but it is more than a hotel. So it offers to Hong Kong customers a lot of things. We are turning Eaton into a cultural space. I work there, running cultural programs of Eaton. Apart from working at Eaton, I am also an artist. We have an artist field known as Virtual Village. That is a work done by myself and my friends. We're established in 2002, and we are doing some performance as well. My name is Michelle. I am one of the heads of the current park. It is very seldom that we are together, the three of us, on an occasion. So you may say that we are like an urban legend, but then we have a space at JCC in Shek Kip Mei, Jockey Club Creativity Center. Okay, so we are opened at irregular times, so if you would like to visit, please follow our Instagram, and we'll let you know the dates. We're established in 2002, and next to me is Ho Siu Lam, and then another one is Billy. So, okay, my name is Michelle. What is your work? I'm a student. Okay. Let me introduce. I am a doctorate student, a PhD to be. I'm a PhD student. Yes, please talk more. I mainly study Hong Kong art history. Before I study in school, I have worked in AAA for a few years, so I'm like coming back home here. I am Ho Siu Lam. I'm an artist. I use photography as a creativity medium. Now, the reason why we are known as New Park, in the past, there was another park, so to speak. In 2012, we started that operation. And it is just a small space to deal with a lot of things. And then in 2022, well, the old one was not sustained. And then we worked on a number of projects, residency projects. We went to Taiwan for some time. And because of COVID-19, we were kept at home for a long time. We felt bored. So we thought of creating space as an art space. Yes, your turn. I'm Billy. I'm a photographer. In 2022, I worked with the other partners to establish this space. Yes. So let me talk about this framework. When it comes to alternative art space and model, it is very abstract. At the same time, it is down to earth. There is a lot of groundwork involved. So this time, there are a number of important aspects that we would like to cover. Venue or location. This is very important. Collaborators, artists, of course, and resources. This is very important. Resources. And if time allows, I can talk about our future developments. So to start with, why I am moderating this thing here, and I'm going to talk about our collections. In 2014, I returned to Hong Kong, and then the first space was in Sham Shui Po, Ableu Street, a very small space there. So each of us has our reasons to start this space. And the way how we run each space is very different. Can you explain why there is this space? Okay. Perhaps I will and spend a lot of time talking about the history. I think in the past there were a number of alternative spaces, but when it comes to art institutions or art schools, art galleries, and commercial activities, we are talking about a way of categorization that is separate from all these. In around 2012, well, I worked on photography. At that time, photography was rather marginalized. It is a marginalized medium. So I tried to identify a cheap space. I found a secondhand bookstore. And in that bookstore, there are a few rooms. And in a 3-meter room, there are a number of small cultural organizations. One works on music, one works on feminism, and that place appealed to me. Empty space, so I rented that space. At the beginning, I worked with a number of photographers. In the first exhibition, it took place in around Shangwan. It had to do with AAA as well. At that time, no one knew me at all. And I continued to the work. After a few years, there was land problem. That second-hand bookstore could not afford the rent, so we tried to find another space. So we moved from Shangwan to Lai Chi Kok Road, Sham Shui Po. It was a window side space. And then we went to Abbey Street. We went to an old tenement building. So Now that space actually was owned by a friend. It was a unit belonging to his family. He charged us very low rent for 2 years. Now, in Hong Kong, we always talked about the land problem. It has been causing problems to many states, not only ours. Perhaps we could share her experience. Yes. Now, talking about guerrilla movements, Joseph, before Eton, you worked on a virtual village and some nomadic projects. And on one occasion, you rented a container truck in Shui Po. Can you tell us your story and how did you then move to Eton? Okay, let me talk about the project. For that project, it was my solo exhibition project. In Shui Po, there are some second-hand product stalls, and then I gathered together some hard disks and hard drives that were disposed of by people. So I recovered other people's data, and I collected images and videos from there, and I created artwork from all those. During the process, I think that was a very interesting community because there are many different types of people. There are people from different sectors, different classes, and I wondered what it would be like if I did an exhibition there. So some container trucks were used for exhibition. So I took part of my exhibition to create a project. And I asked my friends to work with me. They are just artists, budding artists, and we did some exhibitions. And in the trucks, we actually did a number of performance art that was interesting. At first, we did not aim at putting together a community art project. We just wanted to think of an idea. We just wanted to know whether there would be audiences for our project. That was interesting. We made friends with the store operators. Well, we're not really friends, but then sometimes they offered things to us. There are also a lot of things that I could not say here. Many of them are South Asian people. There is an artist named Dou Yue, and at that time, he walked along with some books, and we're wondering whether that was black magic ritual. There is another artist, Bronzan, who was there. He interacted with a durian. So there were other middle-aged men and women there who were curious. That was an interesting experience. Then I moved to Eton. At that time, before I did that project, I worked in Parasite on exhibition curation and management. And then there was a videotage project. And there was collaboration with Eton in that project. With Eton, we worked on community program and screening. And I was lucky at that time. I worked on conversations with some artists, and I was very lucky at that time. Eton continued to ask me to work on some programs in relation to community or creative communities. They asked me whether I'm interested to continue the work. I wanted to expand my scope. I wanted to come into contact with more communities other than contemporary artists. Eton is not a purely art space. If you are not familiar with Eton, well, you may think that it is a hotel where many expensive art pieces and sculptures are displayed. But what we are doing is not that luxurious.
So we're not reliant on our true programming to profit from that, and we're going to we want to use our profits from elsewhere, like karaoke bars and elsewhere, to use profits from those departments to support our endeavors in the Eton Cultural Department to do community building work, maybe like music or literature, and to help marginalized communities like LGBT, migrant workers, or some oneness issues. Those type of talks, we get involved in all of that work. Yeah, because Eton has a very wide scope and you have a lot of people, you have a whole team. So your speed and your timing and your programming is, well, it's very different from the new park space because you guys specialize on wonder. Like every show, you just feature one piece of artwork and a certain artist. Like, I want to ask you, why one object per show? How should I put this? For New Park, the size of our entire space is 100 square feet. The exhibition space. And there is no like further partition there. And out back, we call it our back room. And there's a sink, so all the mess is at the back, and our people are stationed there as well. And there's also a balcony there. So the actual space which is available for exhibitions and shows is about 200 square feet. And if you've went to JCCAC before, all the walls are like kind of tattered and broken, and like we don't have very good renovation. The doors don't really close very well, so there are limitations there. And what we think is because of these limitations, because of these restrictions of space, and also, well, I don't want to use the word limitation, but we work within a certain parameter. The source of our funding would be our own savings. That's basically it. So we are open for profit. We are not non-profit. We are definitely progressing towards profit. We're working on it. So there are various like, because of all these parameters, all these resources, conditions, we think that I think altogether we have over a decade of experience between us in the world of art, and our observation is about like how could we create a ideal situation for artists to create a space for them to converse, and that's very important for us. So for us, quantity is not the priority, quality is. And it's about the process and how could we, when we develop our works with our friends, with our collaborators, we wonder what kind of conversations can we spark. And we think that during this dialogue, we need focus. So that's why we're trying to develop this singular piece of work. And the way we do it is definitely we would have an artist feed. For example, well, one artist feed is not whether like large organization or small is not a must, right? Like there's no explicit rule to state that you would definitely get an artist feed whenever you do anything. But this is like something that we hold true to as our principle, our red line. Well, due to the restrictions that I mentioned, resources, space, and because of our personal like demands and standards, whatever, as a result, we want to do one piece of work and we have a prolonged, sustained conversation with an artist to actually create a practice. So we will. Like in Cantonese, we have this saying, right? 一朝一夕，語無倫次. I speak this today one day, and the other day I talk nonsense. So the vibe of like this whole lightheartedness very much permeates throughout our work. It's fun. We don't have any like baggage. We just want to bounce off each other ideas. So you want a prolonged conversation with your artist. That's very important. And I think the interesting thing is the three of you together. We rarely see all three of you together. Even at your shows, we don't see you. Like at most, you get 2 out of 3. So it's like you select meal A, meal B, or whatever. So I'd like to know what's your conversation between you three? Because when I run a certain show, usually it's just me talking to the artist myself. But you guys are a 3-man team. How do you collaborate amongst yourselves? How should I put this? So we have learned from our experience in the 100 Feet Park, And in the new park, we have new practices, right? In the past, the 100 feet park is just an apartment, a unit, right? For any friend, any artist friend, hey, come over, do a show, but zero management. Entirely hands off. I don't care what you do, what you don't do. I'm just gonna like send your things out there. I'm gonna organize an opening for you, and then maybe we'll have a lunch together, and that's it. But for the new park, I'm saying maybe we could do something, start from zero or start from 50 out of 100 to do something there. So the three of us, how do we discuss amongst ourselves? Maybe it's because like we're very busy people. Like we're at that age, we have a lot of like day-to-day issues, like mundane issues we have to get through. So we don't have a lot of time to meet with each other. But one very important point is that we find a person first, right? We select a artist that we like first. The earlier we set our hearts on a person, the more time we have to organize. And like sometimes the artists, they procrastinate. They will say, "Oh, I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I'll think about it." It's like been a year. Every year we have maybe 3 to 4 series, and yeah, like every month in 100 Feet Park Days is like a one show every month or something like that. Like we realize being an adult is painful. Like I'm not working on this full time, but it's still very painful. So we are doing things differently. We want quality to be better, and we want to introduce more of our in groups there. So why do we do this? And we do have division of labor, right, in terms of implementation or execution. And one of us is good at research and writing, and I am more of like a production manager. The space is not big, but yeah, projection, I could do that, and I could make it work for you. And for Billy, yeah, our professional photographer right there, Billy. So I've never told anybody this, but I can share it with you now. Like, why did we seek Billy out back then? Because I saw his work, I loved it, right? Like, I knew him from way back then, but I never had the chance. But I thought maybe I could try this time. Maybe I could introduce and include him here to look at like what is the world of modern art, right? Just as I've said, like it's a very unique opportunity. You can come here, try it for like half an hour, but like the three of us is totally unrelated. But I saw talent and I like talent, and so I guess I shoved him into the world of art. So usually we just engage each other via WhatsApp, like unless it's very very urgent. It works. Yeah, we deal with everything via WhatsApp. Fortunately, there's not a lot of people on our staff, right? Like we just talk about what we have to deal with right before the grand opening. Is it my turn? Yeah, anything you could add? So what I can share is that we set this up together amongst ourselves, and I am also one of the people featured, I suppose, and it feels very interesting because as Lau says that I'm a photographer, but there are many types of photography. For example, what I specialize is like art is more of a news type of photography, and news photography is under a subset of reality photography. Like it's a very niche thing, but I get the interesting thing about this is that as a photographer slash journalist, when you show your work, it's slightly different from artist photography. Like the cycle is different for us. Every day, well, one day you do one thing, the other day you do another. It's a very quick turnover, fast cycle. You can imagine, like the newspaper is my exhibition space, like that's it. But once I'm in that art space, firstly, the time works differently. we have longer time to do more things. So my practice changed as a result. And for me, the most important thing is that, turns out this is possible because I have two modes at the same time. So I have more time to feel things out. And secondly, not when I am featured, right? When I'm the person who is planning the show, when I'm doing admin work or whatever, I realize, I could do this. I didn't know I could do this. And I think this is a very interesting project that we share between the three of us because we come from very, very different backgrounds. And this stark difference between our backgrounds means that, like photographers, we are a very, very small world, very small circle, but I can bring my friends, bring my colleagues, bring people from my world into this world. But at the same time, as I've said, there's a space for dialogue in this new project that we have. We could chat. So even when it comes to talking about photography itself, there's a lot of opportunities there. So as an average photographer, what should you do when you become an art photographer, right? There's more to talk about that, and that's a new possibility for me. So you could imagine in a different world, in a different format, even if it's still limited to photography, there are new possibilities. So in work or in other areas, there are like more similar opportunities as well. Yeah, this is a very important point you brought up. One of the interesting things about art space is the space itself and the way you edit it. That's very important. So at art school, I majored in painting, studio practice, right? So, but once I'm out here looking at shows, looking at exhibition, a lot of exhibitions, a lot of space are like a painting in a blank space, in a white box. It's very unnatural. Like usually when we're out there, day-to-day life, we don't have white screens, blank backgrounds, or green screens. Like why would we have that in an exhibition space? So me and my friends, we try our best to avoid hanging up our works in a flat wall. That's one thing. And that actually really doesn't help with labor costs anyway. So that's another reason. So I'm curious, when you play with vinyl stuff, you have a space in Eton with a lot of interesting stuff. Like you look at the show, or you went into a park, right? Out, like you move from the top of the terrace down to the park, right? So I wonder, as an artist, or when you have a slightly different background, sometimes perhaps the melange, the mix of these backgrounds makes it more interesting. So I'd like to ask a bit more, litigate the issue of formality and informality. Yes, I think the nature of Eton, after all, there's an F&B stays there. It's a 5-star hotel. There's reception, check-in, and everything. So at the gym room as well. So there are multiple different spaces in that same building. So sometimes people will not be satisfied with just working at that one space. So that's the most interesting thing. It's like hacking into different spaces. And some audiences, they're not meant to see art there. For example, we did a lot of what we call motion festival. There's a Hong Kong dance producer, she's Alice Gracian. We work with her. And the accessible nature of that is that we want people to suddenly realize there's a pop-up in there throughout the entire hotel space. So Eunice was there, and even if you go to the hotel grounds, or so if you're familiar with our space, we have a central hollowed out part. In the bottom, there's like a sort of back end, like all of you sudden, once you're dining at the bottom where you're dining, you would see above you a lot of people doing parkour, like you might be frightened that they would fall down, and or like other people would sing Cantonese opera at a height, or there's like but right on the terrace there'll be suddenly a pop-up pole dance. So all these like various performances, or whenever in our approach in our programming, it's all about drawing more members of the general public to see what we're doing, to like be able to reach out to different audiences. So I like to share something else as well, even though this is not necessarily about the alternative art space format. I compare with the other people. I have more resources, right, in my organization. But after all, the hotel itself is built like many decades ago, is not meant to be an art space. So There's been a lot of renovation, new spaces, maybe like a gallery or a cinema, music room, etc. But the gallery itself used to be a kitchen, for example, and there's a lot of pipes in that room. And like the new walls, the walls are 3 decades old. And there was a time when we worked with a city contemporary dance troupe, and we were collaborating on a program called Jumping Frames. And we have hired a very established artist called Marina Shimadomo. And she's now known as like a very important artist here in Asia. And during her performance, because just a few days ago there was like a black rainstorm, a huge rain, so the roof was leaky. So as she was dancing, there's like water dripping, and she performed in a space which is right next to the wall, right, and interact with the wall. And there's like the wall is wet, there's water, and but she's very understanding because. She understands that this is not a perfectly formed art space, not in the first place. And in our early days, we didn't have like even in her early stages of Marina's career, like she didn't have invitations necessarily from all these established institutions with a lot of resources. And in that vibe, right, in that like imperfectly prepared environment, people actually have better interaction rather than just having like several white walls around you. It actually increases the distance between everyone. So I think there are a lot of possibilities in Eton. Yeah, I think the question that Ines was asking, right, a white box room compared with an alternative space, how does it differ, right? So I want to tell an interesting anecdote about Alice, right? That's the first artist we featured in New Park. If you look at the photo, there's some like the artwork are these like sticky tape on the ground. So when Elvis shows us this work, what did it look like? So Elvis teaches. She lives in Tung Ping Chau, an island. So she had a backpack, and inside that backpack, he had a Ziploc bag, and in that Ziploc bag there is a NDL water bottle, and the water bottle is like the thing you wrap the sticky the scotch tape around. So the entire art piece is in a Ziploc bag and around a water bottle. And I went, oh, so this compared with how we imagine artworks to be and how art pieces would be transported, this is like very, very different. So Elvis's piece, he used around 3 to 5 years to collect all types of newspaper, different like texts, and he used that scotch tape to remove that text from the newspaper. So on the scotch tape, you see like there's print there. Like these are actually titles of newspaper headlines, or like the wording is fudged and kind of blurry. So the way it's packaged and the time and the resources that the artist had dedicated to this work is provides a very stark contrast. But when the artist like took it out and we said, oh, why don't we put it on the ground? And this piece in and of itself is informing us how should we present this, because like how big is the space? Like it is a very long 3 meter plus long scotch tape.
How should we showcase this and present this in order to showcase the artist's obsession? In fact, there was some anger in the artist. And in relation to our space, some kind of dialogue can be created. And we realized that the best thing is to just put it on the floor. You also pick it up and see it more closely. Yes, I remember that. That was really a very good art piece because we saw newspaper headlines, and then there were also some newspapers on political news. At that time, I grouped together 8 of those scotch tapes, and that was excellent. I thought of how to display it. Should it be hung up or should it be just placed on the floor and so on? We had a long discussion about it. And our final decision was to just put it on the floor. That was good. At that time, we resorted to our intuition to handle that. And if we display it in another place, then, well, I cannot say that it is not permissible, but then it takes a lot of courage. You may have to create a line, or you may have to put it on a stand in an art gallery. You may need to think of a nicer way to present. There are different options, but we just make use of the most straightforward way of artists to present it. And audiences can look at it in a most straightforward way as well. I was worried that it would be damaged, but Elvis said, no problem, don't worry. Well, that's what the artist said. But I think from time to time, well, it needs to be cleaned by a piece of cloth. So I think there are a lot more possibilities. No matter whether in the future the artist can reuse this piece of work, at least this is a very good experience. It is a good way of display, so that in the future, the artists can develop in different places, and this is a very good experiment, at least. Concerning the way of display, I think it is closely related to resources. Every time when we work on an exhibition, we'll have to see what are some possible ways to display the work. And sometimes there may not be the necessary resources. Some time ago, we worked on a show on wigs, and that space actually is very vacant because those wigs are very small, and I could not think of a good way to display. Just now you talked about the way of hacking. So how can we turn things into the future? I think this is a very big philosophy. Just now you saw a picture with many wigs, and in the middle there's like a snowy mountain. So I grabbed a lot of posters, a lot of used materials, and so on, and I just dumped all those things together. We bought a number of bottles of spray, and then we just sprayed things on it, like doing an icing dessert. And so that's how we did it. It's this snowy mountain. After that, we just broke it. I think this is an extremely low cost piece of display. So I think this is very important because sometimes we are accustomed to institutional method or a certain way of presenting, the nicest, the tidiest way of presentation. But then very often that was not really the format as it was produced in the studio. So why can't we adopt the artist or studio's perspective in display? Okay. Now for this show, we discussed with 2 Japanese artists for 2 years, and in the process, there were a lot of other happenings. We did not have a big budget, but the most important thing is to find the right collaborators, like the 3 of you here. I could luckily cooperate with Eaton, and then those artists were brought into Hong Kong, and they stayed for like 2 weeks. We had to squeeze everything out of the artists. So we split one exhibition into 2 places. I would like to listen to your explanation about that project. Yes, that one was really a very good experience. I think that those 2 artists' work, it is not traditional contemporary art. Art forms showcased in Eton are not traditional. Some are artists from subcultural background, for example, Laozi and some other like internet artists. I think working on these artists is extremely interesting. So I think I must support that project. Besides, it was just coincidence. At that time, we're organizing a party. and there were some musicians involved. They flew to Hong Kong from Indonesia. Those musicians had worked with Beyond before, and these artists also had worked on an album of Beyond. I find the whole thing a coincidence. It's like pre-planned, but it's really not. So we shared a number of amazing ideas. We at Eton provided resources. We thought of some relevant ways, and those partners could enjoy some extra resources. We have also some established partners, for example, Hong Kong Ballet, National Geographic. Some are high-end, some are less high-end. So we'd like to maintain the diversity, a very wide spectrum. I think this is important. Eton wants to engage with many communities. So when I work there, I am not really curating for a show. I think it's like curating human. We find different collaborators and we think of ways to collaborate with them so that there can be a lot of happenings in Eton. Apart from programs initiated by us, well, many partners also bring a number of programmings to us. So we have supported more than 300 programs altogether. Of course, that means a very heavy workload, but you find it rewarding. Some people don't have resources. Some are migrant workers, some are refugees. They have zero budget when they work on non-community programs. But Eton provides a proper stage for them to execute their work. So they don't need to work on the street. If they work on the street, they may be driven away by the police. So at least at Eton, there is a proper setting for them to do their work. Back to collaborators. Well, I think my scope has been extended. I can get to know more people. I can learn a lot. I know more about their experience. And Eton provides a safe space for them to do their work. So for New Park, I know that you have collaborated with people from Taiwan, right? So what about your space? What about your collaboration with other people? When it comes to collaboration, I think it is rather organic because when Taiwan artists came, we had to find accommodation for them. And at that time, we were lucky. So she went back to Taiwan, and then there was 1 month window. They stayed in Mongkok for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks in Wan Chai. So accommodation problem was solved. Accommodation in Hong Kong is extremely expensive. A new park is turned into their studio. That residency project is not a formal one. So they are not forced to put up exhibition. They are not forced to create any work. In the past, in early 2019, I worked with 7 Hong Kong artists, and there were artists from Tainan. And then in Tainan, we established a space for exhibition, residency, and workshops. And each story has an area of 500 to 600 square feet. At that time, I closed 100 feet park, and at that time, a number of other spaces emerged. And at that time, it seems that there is no program talking about people leaving Hong Kong. At that time, housing was already very expensive. And I find Taiwan an interesting place because it's cheaper, time goes slower. With the same amount of money, artists can do a lot more. So I started the work with this concept. I made new friends. Last year in 2023, the border was reopened. So they really wanted to come back to Hong Kong. But you really need to find accommodation for them. It is not possible for them to stay in my studio because we'd like to offer them better hospitality. And this time, this is a very interesting experience.
Because Tainan, right, they have their own group, and they would seek out, say, in Japan, or like different spaces in Japan or in Taitung, right? It's just like a web, right? Like the scale might be like much larger. Like maybe in a year there would be just 1 to 2, like not a very big scale, but every 1 to 2 years there's just a couple of artists. But for an organization of our size, I think that's pretty neat already. Like we don't have a like rich backer. We are not a large institution, and we all have our own day jobs. Even though it's not very large in scale, but our experiences could be shared with different groups of people, maybe young people, and we keep trying to like be on the prowl for new resources to able to do host our events. So it's 8 p.m. approximately. So we have for the next half an hour we have a Q&A session. So try to come up with a question, people. No questions? Anyone? So you talk about collaborating with other spaces. So, but this is something that you could not have done over the past few years. But apart from having a base here in Hong Kong, you would like to expand to other places, or you like to introduce artists to other countries to host shows there, right? So I found out, like particularly in Europe, there are a lot of artists and space. They talk about how link up community. For example, like when you apply for grant, you can write them a letter, and I've tried that, right? Like an artist applied for a grant, I wrote them a letter saying that they conducted a sharing at MySpace, even though it's a very minor thing, but it is helpful, right? I did not expect that, and it's not just help in the form of money, right? Like not everything can be solved by money. For example, for some artists, there's an exchange of labor. Like they help us set up certain things, and I help them write certain things. There's a lot of these like very low key, very like basic forms of exchange of labor. I think that's worth thinking about. Anyone, any questions or? What about you guys? Do you have any questions for yourselves? Maybe I can address something else. Before we started this conversation, Michelle told me that there's something called 拒絕接受現實. I refuse to accept reality. And so I don't know if it's confront reality or accept reality, what it is. Yeah, this is something. When we realized that we will all be here in the three of us here in the same space, we decided to match our stories, right? So in this day and age, why do we want to make a new park? Why do we want to create a new space to facilitate interpersonal dialogue, which requires a very intense burst of focus to look at something, to reflect on something, and to think about what you just thought about, right? Like in some ways, it's beyond resources. For us, resources might not be necessarily the first priority. It's actually the time you dedicate to this project and the process of thought behind, like why do we do this? We were joking, right? Like the reason why we did this is because we refused to accept our current reality. So what we can say, what we can do, or in terms of resources, what the resources will allow you to do when everything is lacking, when everything poses their own limitations. How do you reject that status quo? So I think in the new park, we create a possibility for this rejection. Of course, we are very limited, like, oh, we have to pay rent, we have to pay the utilities, right? Oh, the video is not prepared yet. Like, all these things happen, but it's precisely through these small setbacks. I don't think it's a setback. I think like when there's like small obstacles, not necessarily always small smooth sailing, that creates an environment, a dialogue which has value beyond all monetary value. Like we have an opportunity to we have an opportunity to transmit very significant meaning of a very profound nature. I really agree. Like we often talk about what events we have to organize or what type of sculpture structure we want to do. Like when you like, sometimes I think like you dedicate so much money, right? But you end up with very like small, like uninteresting things. But sometimes when you spend some micro money, you can form great connections. Like I've been thinking about recently, what is growth, right? I have been organizing for 4 years, and why do we want to grow? Why should we grow? Could we just sustain ourselves as the small thing that we have right now? I only do micro events. Is that okay? Give me $7. Give me $7. I can make something for you. But like, yeah, $7 is plenty. So I really agree with this, like small but in depth, I guess. Like it's about how to touch people's hearts. It's a chubby heart that I have. Yeah, I'd like to share. Like we talked about not having a lot of money. More like money, a lot of money, lot out of money. That's not a problem with me. Like in my experience, right, for during COVID or like at the 100 feet park, like for the grand opening, I used $500 out of my pocket to buy snacks, and my friend sponsored some red and white wine. Like I think last time they came, they brought a dozen bottles. Like for artists or for people in the art world, whatever you are, whoever you are, the dialogue generated by the grand opening, the interaction in during that day is actually what I love the most. Like the show itself lasts for a very short time, but that type of like opening, because like there are more people during the opening, or naturally, so there's naturally more opportunities for interaction. You form new relationships. So yeah, that's why I never like galleries. Why do you like kick us out when time's up? Like we can keep chatting all through the night, right? Like slowly but surely you get to a state where the space serves the artist, uh, or it becomes a small artist community organization in that space. And small isn't a problem. A lot of people would see this and they would realize, oh, I want to do this as well. And they say, I want to do this as well. And I will tell them, do it yourself, right? Like we could have a more distributed, decentralized manner, like art or whatever. All of it is about innovation, about creativity. It inevitably it involves taste. You like a certain style. I like that style. I would organize that style of event. So I want to more of these space to pop up. Like I go to those Mongkok Arts festivals. It's not necessarily a mega grand show. Maybe we'll talk about 20 to 30 small spaces organizing a show together. That's already quite a lovely event. You don't need like all this pomp and circumstance. Of course, like if you have the resources, like Art Basel, wow, we could do this whole big thing or song and dance. Of course, that's great, right? But some of these smaller events, even if you fund us, we can't do this. Of course, if you want to fund us, you're more than welcome. Yeah, I'd like to ask, um, excluding the money issue, what's your greatest challenge, greatest difficulty, greatest conundrum, and how do you overcome those? Like apart from rent and money. Yeah, I don't have those problems, I think. So I don't really know how to answer that. So, but I think you mentioned sustain. That's very interesting because before I do that, like Chantel has already established a very good solid foundation, and I attempted to expand the community. But after all, as we continue this project, my team has a 3-person team. I work on the cultural side, and my colleagues work on music, and another colleague is more like a coordinator, to help us deal with all the troublesome paperwork, right? So we often give a lot of paperwork to other departments. Whenever there's event, I would draft up an event track list, what will happen when, what will we need, which departments do we need to notify, and what payments is necessary. So that's all we can do. Sometimes boss would ask me, like, how could we grow more? How could we reach out to more people? And that's a question mark that I have as well. Like, even like sustaining it would be a very good, very healthy state, right? And I ask myself, like, there's much more alternative art space now than before. Like like in the 90s, maybe there's like 1 to 3 alternative art space. Now there are so many spaces. So what's the meaning for the existence of these spaces? Are there actually no space, no exhibitions, no exposure, or like all these spaces, they are run by like people who care. They really want to showcase works that they find interesting, and in a few years, usually those spaces won't last. And I've been thinking, I don't know if this is unique to Hong Kong or is this the same everywhere in the world. And sometimes I'm curious, like, how would we grow with this model? Sometimes maybe there are like larger organizations like Parasite, and they would be able to sustain that. They have more time. But apart from that type of model, of that like snowballing model, for other groups, they would rely on funding, to external sources of funding to sustain that. Are there any other models? And I've been thinking about that. I want to know like how that would work. Yeah, you've conducted some research, right? What do you think? Yeah, this question is interesting because there is an underlying, I guess, underlying pretext or prerequisite there. Like growth means bigger, right? That's the underlying assumption. I don't know if that's the best. I don't know if that's the best is not the word. I don't know if that's the most interesting thing for an artist or for a practitioner in a natural space. All they want is to be interesting, to be spectacular, and that spectacular can be defined in a very like loose manner. It could be very well organized, or it could be very like improvised. So when it comes to a model or a system, of course, I've left the AAA like before I left AAA to pursue further studies. I've been in an institution for many years. And how much conversion can happen in an institution, right? So when I was involved in New Park, my mindset is to ignore systems, ignore models. It's trial and experiment, and like whenever we encounter problems, we deal with that then. So it's going back to the original point, starting point. Who are you serving? Who are you doing this for? And the meaning is the event itself, the issue itself. Like, as I always say, like, I'm gonna do it insofar that I'm happy doing it. If I'm not happy, I won't do it. So how could I do it in a way which would make me and everyone happy, but not unhappy?
How can I work and become happy? That's the point. So that means sense of satisfaction, right? It's difficult. So sometimes we will feel that we have heavy workload and we have hard time. When it comes to system, over the years, we have kept on thinking about that. But the system is not to think of too many systems, not to think of systems too much. So we will maintain the same scale. If we feel unhappy, we won't do it. And we will keep on finding ways. The simplest way is, for example, there may be donations for you to buy art pieces. With this model, are you going to rely on that model and then you will change yourself? You will just try your best to fulfill other people's requests. Nowadays, there are talks reducing government funding or public funding. And all of a sudden, if the budget is cut, then you have to find other ways. You should not rely on anything to sustain your work. On the other hand, perhaps we should create based on crowd strength. So if there are a lot of people involved, if you shout out for help, then many people will come out to help. So it's like an emergency button. Yes. So I think in our will help each other. And one day if I shout for help, then someone will hear me, then they will come to help. This is about human resources and other types of resources. That's how we have used the 100 feet park for 2 years. So it is derived from a very interesting idea. It is not true that when there is no space, then we will feel desperate and we will stop working. No. Yes, well said. There are different types of spaces, different art spaces, and they can help the communities in many ways. When you build this relationship, what is the relationship of these different places with the audiences? How do you reach out to audiences? I think all these three places are very different. So I want to know how you think of building relationship. Relationship with the audiences. Well, that is complicated because there are many different communities. And you don't know why they come. And in some cases, you may know. Let's say I work on a queer event, then those audiences who come may also be queer themselves. And if I work on a contemporary art exhibition, then there may be people working on contemporary art coming as well. So sometimes there are people who come to Eton for accommodation, for dining, for work, and so on. So sometimes I'm curious to know whether these people know what we are doing. Will they be interested? So this is always in my mind. Very often there are tourists coming to Eton. And when they come to Hong Kong, they don't want to be stuck in the hotel. They want to go out and enjoy themselves and look around. So I want to see whether I can have more chance to reach out to them. And sometimes I feel happy. Some time ago, I worked on a conscience festival, and there is a installation on sunrise, and some people came from Macau to take a look. So I think this is very unexpected. It is rewarding. Sometimes when there are too many events, you don't know who will be coming. But sometimes they make a number of remarks, and they would be very meaningful to us. Well, I do not have the audiences in my mind when I work on exhibition. Our focus is an interdisciplinary platform. Putting up shows is just an excuse to bring up those issues. Those who try to answer the questions are not only contemporary artists. Well, medium is not quite related here. I think there are some people who are from research disciplines. Some are working on video games, some are writing novels, and so on. So there are people from more than one creative discipline. They brought their own crowds to our exhibition. I did not have much time to reach out, apart from creating newsletters or using the Instagram. I basically rely on word of mouth. I don't need to meet any KPI. There is not the need to measure footfall. We are just a small space, and we are not open every day. So I do not really think of special ways to reach out to the audiences. But perhaps I just want to create a good show and to highlight some interesting issues. And through the exhibition, as long as people are willing to come, then I'm happy. I'm fine with that. It's okay. What about you? You are not open every day. So how can people find you? They can call us. So the way how we're opened is already changed. So we now communicate through IG. So we will say, okay, please pay attention to our opening hours. That was done in the past, but now we're too busy. We just wait till there are new works. And when we grow up, when there are more people involved, there are overseas curators like Michelle. There are people coming over from overseas. When we are open, of course, anybody can come in. But then if you think of JCCAC, it is not a place frequented by many people. There may be people who are just walk-ins. So that is not our most important point. There may be people who are interested in our project, so they come particularly for our project, and we have to open our space purposefully. We spend time together in conversations, and sometimes the time spent in conversation is even longer than the time they spend in watching our art pieces. Sometimes artists may not be present at the show, but in conversations, sometimes artists will even talk more. Wherever we put up our exhibition, well, you can, for example, write up a few pages or only one page, but then real communication is where we have conversation. Sometimes we just talk based on our interpretation. It is a lot more than what artists can tell us. Audiences will make their own judgments, and through this judgment or their own imagination, those points can be conveyed back to the artist. This may be indirect, but at least it is interactive. I want to make 2 points. When people come to art spaces, they will ask whether there are similar art spaces like this, but we don't have a directory like that of AGA. And people may not want to create a directory like that. So I think the art enthusiasts have to look up IG. I thought of having some kind of hotline, like those operated by banks. And then, for example, if you press 3, you will get the opening hours. If you press 2, then you will know the artists involved, and so on and so forth. Hi, I'm an AA intern. I have a few questions to ask. I just got to know a little bit about the art market in Hong Kong. So my question is, as practitioners in the art scene in Hong Kong, how can they expand their network, especially for the fresh graduates? They would like to display their works. They need this kind of space. They need these opportunities. So how can we build a network? My second question is, comparing with other places, in Hong Kong, there are fewer ethnic minorities. In the US, for example, artwork of different artists represents their own identity, their own nationality, their race, their own history. Their artwork would like to create shared feelings with people of the same background. In Hong Kong, what is our art style? For Hong Kong artists, who are your target audiences? I think Asia Art Archive is the right place for you. So let me answer the first question. Let's forget about networking, just make friends. Just make friends.
In the end, what will sustain you, or what will I think behind this is the idea of a career and the idea of a practice, and I'm definitely for the idea of the practice. You know, like if you are looking for a network, you may get a career, but you may not have a practice. 係咯，咁所以that's what I mean by forget about networking, go make friends. And I think all of us are friends, right?
Well, this is a good question. So the question is, what are we doing? I think you need to have strong passion for art. If you have this passion, then you can sustain your work, no matter whether you treat it as your hobby or your career. I think creating art is a hobby. If it is your hobby, then you will feel happy even if you spend money. You won't feel any pain. If you have interest, if you have passion in something, then naturally you will gather together with other people who are interested in the same thing. Then you will be able to form a network.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And what else would I want to say? Yeah, can I answer the same question as well? I have some experience to share. When I first graduated, I was thinking like, how do I do networking? How do I find a space to show myself? And I was chatting to some institutional people, and so I chatted them up, and gradually when I went to those places, and people go there to look at the shows, to chit chat, and I'm not necessarily talking about a very healthy new relationship with new friends who do a network. Maybe you can organize some events amongst people, friends with the same budget. You can self-organize some things in an underground manner. That's even healthier. Like, because in the past, there was a time when I have a lot of friends who just happened when we bumped into COVID, and there's some abandoned spaces out there, or like strange spaces in the city, and we place some artworks there. So I think that like off-site practice really affect my own practice as well, and my own creativity. And as you do more of these things, people notice, and people notice the interesting things that you do, and they would gradually want to approach you. So what I'm saying is that if you approach people, it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but like, on the contrary, more people want to approach you when you do things which are interesting. And the other thing is, I think Eton would like to support like minorities and marginalized communities in our practice. So if you're interested in these areas, I have some programs. Right? Let me advertise some. So we have a photographer book launch coming out soon, and in some talented migrants from Indonesia, like Hong Kong local photographers. There we have books there. And in mid-March, there's the International Day of Elimination of Racial Discrimination. There's a whole bunch of like stuff about Hong Kong ethnic minorities, like human libraries or workshops, like say their food and drink culture or their music performances. So if you are interested in like ethnic minority cultures, like we welcome you. Where are you? They're in Jordan. Number 380.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is about the previous generations of independent art spaces in Hong Kong. Joseph, you were talking about the 1990s generation, right? I think my question is, are you guys in conversation with some of these artists or curators from the 90s or early 2000s, and in terms of the work that they were doing or the the questions that they were asking? What are the things that resonate with the work that you guys do today? That's my first question. And the second one, these are all archive-related questions, maybe, but please bear with me. The second was about documentation. The one thing I can say is that I have, for instance, artist friends who run spaces, and they are extremely meticulous about documentation. They document everything, they share everything. Some of them say that because our spaces are small, we want to reach out to larger communities or larger groups. And some of them think about, oh, maybe there will be a researcher, let's say 20 years after today, and they might want to go back to that particular time and then understand better how the independent spaces were working. And some of them passionately refuse to document their work, which we totally understand. It's an artistic strategy. Sometimes it's a way to stay underground. So I was wondering if you could speak about how you negotiate this big question of documentation about the work that you do. Thank you.
Maybe I can start first because when we used to be in Sham Shui Po, like a fashion designer had that space and they installed some CCTV in there because they were selling like expensive clothes as well. So because I didn't have the money, I didn't bother to like take them down. So actually I have like years worth of CCTV video footage, which is great for performances. It's great for documenting performances because you have different angles, but it's just a lot of work to really edit. I think it's amazing. Like, I think I will continue doing this because like, can you imagine like having different angles from the ceiling for the videos? So that's my way, but I just really need to get down to doing that. And interesting about documentation because it's also about like history and truth, right? Because I was looking back at, I mean, I do a lot of photos, like not really professional ones, but just with my phone. South has done some for me as well. Also, sometimes I ask back friends who I've exhibited for their portfolio, and then I see some of the documentation from current plans, and then they edit the lighting to make it look like a white cube space, like the walls. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay, you could have told me that, but never mind. Yeah. So, yeah.
I forgot the first.
Documentation.
Oh, documentation. What's the first question?
The previous generation.
Previous generation. From the 90s, do you still have conversations with them? Or do you run like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I remember one of the artists we show was called Carrie Kwok. And that time he like kind of just did a show in Joyce, like curated by Aditya. And I was like just met Aditya, was like finding, oh, this artist is so talented, why people doesn't know much about him. He's from the older generation that have been so long. Like I think from the contemporary art side, don't know much about him, but rather other like theater, fashion, they know so much about him. So I feel like so gratitude to have his work, like kind of retrospective work that's showing in Eton and bring to a broadened audience. And later he also showed in like Tycoon and other kind of gallery. That I feel like that kind of conversation with like finding some kind of hidden gem is one of our kind of focus. We also like work with like Carrie for another project that he was bringing. There's like a Hong Kong born like American artist called Kitty Choi, and she was the first like Chinese American lesbian to write a novel. And she also a bodybuilder and also win like medals in gay games and is a model for lesbian erotica. Such kind of like old thing I'm also very fascinating in because like I also work in like video touch before, like dealing with a bunch of archive that I enjoy like digging those like old stuff. But I also want to like kind of not answer but also curious because like when I was working in video touch we had so like resources to deal with those archive and things getting molded things can be like you can like rewatch those like old tapes. So I feel like documentation definitely is very important, and also how you preserve it, like what AA did was really great. Yeah.
I don't think we are in actual physical conversations with practitioners from the 90s, but I like to think that their ethos inform the way that that we work. My first project at Asia Art Archive in 2012 was on Oil Street, which involved me staying up late over the weekend to go to bars to talk to people who used to run artist-run spaces. Action research, they call it. But I think when you talk to them, right? And one of the people who really have inspired me is Mei Feng, who at the time not only was working at Video Touch in Oil Street in the late 90s, but was also part of 1A Space and also had a part-time gig at Zuni, right? So she was at multiple spaces. And now she, of course, is the boss lady of Fudalao, right? And everyone looks up to her. You don't want to piss me off. But I think, then having someone whose creative life transformed and transcend that era to become something else, and to run a building like Food Tech that enables so much through so many sort of different time periods, I think is a real inspiration. And for me then, to sort of see the documentation of Oil Street, of all of these different spaces, the first incarnation of 1A, of Artist Commune, of Videotage, to then sort of then remember that it's normal for these spaces to die, and it's okay. And they will come back to life just in different forms. And, like 20 years later, there may or may not be a researcher who then goes to a bar and look for you and asks, do you have photographs? Right? And you can call that serendipity. You can call that sort of just part of that creative practice. I just like to think that we continue that in some ways. Like I see our conversations that happen at our little balcony in New Park as a continuation of that, right? Because you enable these conversations from people from such different places and sort of points of their life that still have a passion for art, and to believe in the form to actually be able to make a difference in whatever way. And I think that is kind of the ethos that I think like we still carry on. And our documentation is on cloud with self.
So I think this is almost a wrap. Can you just allow us like 1 minute to do a plug each for our upcoming shows? So I will have a solo show of Madeline Wong. She's also a practitioner from, I think, last generation, but she moved to Lisbon. She used to teach in BU, and she's coming over to do a solo show at Current Plans and a residency, because thanks to Spring Workshop, we now have a room, actually, we can host people. So yeah, it's called Sour Punch, and it's opening on March 23rd.
Oh, yeah. We are having a group exhibition opening the 26th that having artists like Zoe Martin, Revido Cohen, Future Holes, and some younger generation artists from Hong Kong like Mui Hoying and mainly artist Joy Lee. So it will be a show about storytelling and also the human-animal relationship. So come to opening and see the performance by Zoe and Sonia, and also another performance by Joy. Yeah, in 26.
At New Park, we are waiting for Lao Wai to drop her second or third episode of the TV series that they're making. We're waiting for it. We'll keep you posted. But on the 14th of March, we actually have a Filipino film collective called Los Otros coming through, and we'll be doing a private screening. So also watch out for that. So that's Shireen Seno and John Torres.
Thank you so much. Talking about films, I think Basel also has a film series happening at that time. So yeah, try to go see everything, especially our spaces. Thank you so much.